Ever gone into labor and debated getting an epidural? Let's talk about epidurals from like the anesthesia standpoint. When you come in for an epidural, I'm like, hey, can you sit like a Halloween cat? Or down south, I'm like, hi, can you sit like a boiled shrimp? Positioning plays like a huge part in epidural, okay? Your spinal column is kind of like this, and when you're sitting straight up like this, think of your spaces kind of like that. When you lean forward like a Halloween cat, your spaces open up like that, and I can get... When you're admitted to the hospital, your anesthesia team is notified that you're admitted, you know, when you're in labor. And we're notified whether or not you're thinking you want an epidural, want an epidural, don't want an epidural, things like that. Obviously, it is best case scenario for me to come and talk to you before you get into full-blown labor, because then when, you know, you're like, it's hard to have like a legit conversation with you. So if it's possible, I come and get consent from you before you go into full-blown pain mode and your contractions are super close apart. But if that's the case, I come and talk to you and give my little spiel, but point is, my spiel depends on what stage of labor that you're in. Lots of things are changing when you're pregnant, such as how your blood clots. So there's something called your platelet count that I have to make sure is at a certain level and not below a certain level in order for it to be safe for me to give you an epidural. And that's because, like, you know, when I'm placing the epidural, obviously there's blood vessels that are nearby, and if it does hit, it's fine. But if you're not clotting appropriately, then you're not going to clot, and then, you know, it could just be like this whole spiel of bad things. So if your anesthesia provider is like, oh, waiting on your blood count, that's why. So as soon as your nurse comes in to place your IV and get your blood drawn, the sooner I can give you an epidural. In layman terms, the epidural space actually does not exist until I make it exist. It's like between two layers that are closely together, and then when I inject a fluid or air, it separates the layer to create the epidural space. A lot of mama bears come in and they're like, hey, the last time I came in with labor, they told me it was too late for me to get an epidural. That's sort of a lie, but sort of not. It also just depends on how quickly you got to the point where you're at 10 centimeters. If someone calls me and they're like, she's at 9 centimeters, but she's been at 9 centimeters for like the last hour, then I'll still give you an epidural. If you went from like 2 to 10 in like 5 minutes, like 2 centimeters to 10 centimeters in 5 minutes, then by the time I get in there set up, no matter how fast I am, baby's gonna be crowning long before I give you that medication, before the medication kicks in. So that's when we're like, too late. But that's why some women can get epidurals super late and super dilated, and some women can't. So it's just like scenario to scenario. An epidural is completely different placement than what is called a spinal or a neuraxial block, or like spinal block. In your mind, it's probably the same because you're in the same position and I'm going in what's the same location, but the technique is completely different. I'm going into an entirely different space. I just got home from work and I think Austin and Oliver might have just figured that out. They're going to come out and get me. If you don't know what a boiled shrimp is, then you're not in the South, and that's fine. I won't use that example. There's a lot of pressure behind placing a perfect epidural. That's why I